It's no secret.
It's no secret.
We'll get started in a minute. We're just waiting for a couple of people to join. Okay, today we're going to talk about tangible resources. So this is the second session, second tutorial in our Qualifi Level 3 Certificate in Business Management program on the Business Resources module. And we're going to talk about tangible physical resources. It's going to be our focus today. Okay, can you hear me okay? Can you hear and see me okay? I'm going to so the lady on screen is Pamela Melroy. So she's an astronaut, obviously. Thank you. And we're going to talk about one of the challenges that she and other astronauts face, which is writing in space. But we'll come to that in a while. All right. So let's just recap on where we're at. This is the Business Resources module. Our focus today is understanding the purpose of managing physical and technological resources. That's a sort of learning outcome. Our assessment criteria are actually there's a typo there, so let me just draw a line through this aspect. Describe the importance of physical and technological resources required. Line through that. Not in selecting employees, required in an organization. Okay, so describe the importance of physical and technological resources required in an organization. So we're going to talk about things, okay? The physical and technological resources. Generally, we're talking about tangible resources, but because I'm going to include systems in that, there's an element that's intangible, such as, software as part of the systems element. But that's where our focus is. So the last week we talked about, introduced the business resources module, and we talked about human resources. In particular, we talked about how organizations select employees and some of the documents required, and how they get to that description, defining what the skills requirements are, when we're looking to choose an employee. Now, we in com- in addition to that, in our in our Friday class last week, we were dealing with the HRM module. So there's a clear overlap between this module and that module, uh, and we talked about HR planning, and we'll continue with the HR module on Friday. So that does tie in. There's a crossover between these two modules, particularly in terms of the job analysis element. In addition, we will talk about recruitment selection as one of the final modules in about 3 weeks' time. Okay, but this is our focus today. Our focus today is around these elements here. Okay, understanding the purpose of managing the physical and technological resources in an organization, and then describing the importance of them, describing the importance of these resources, and then how we manage them in the organization. Now, the last class, just to recap, we talked about choosing candidates. So we've had that sort of idea around, how do we work out who we're going to hire? And central to that was this idea of skills and knowledge and attitude. In other words, what makes a candidate employable? All right. So, what makes a candidate attractive to an employer? So, if we were to ask that question, we might talk about a number of different things. We might talk about essential criteria, such as specific skills, certain levels of experience. We might talk about things like knowledge about a particular activity or topic. Okay, and then we might also have preferred capability. So not essential per se, but also it would be nice to have. For example, a second language, additional relevant experience, maybe a qualification at a higher level. Okay, so all of these are some of the things that we might go looking for, and they will be based on what we define as the requirements of the job. Now, that can be quite different because every job is different, obviously. So the requirements will vary a lot. But in addition to some essential and preferred capabilities and criteria, the best employers will also look for things like attitude and aptitude. Okay, so then maybe around values or principles, maybe around elements like willingness to work hard, ability to manage oneself. In other words, that you don't need hand holding or close supervision. Now that can be a double-edged sword, but these are, I suppose, more qualities that an employer might look for. Now, some of them might be related to the job design or the job analysis piece. For example, it might be a case that the job requires people who can work on their own because they're going to be out in the field. They're going to have to make decisions on a much faster rate than relying on getting back to head office and seeking permission. So, what makes a candidate attractive to an employer? The fundamental answer to that is it depends. Right? It depends on what the employer is looking for and what the employer's needs are. All right. So that's part of the challenge in terms of addressing that initial learning objective from last week, which was around how organizers select their employees and the importance of the various skills. It has to come from some sort of analysis into the requirements of the job and the requirements of the manager and the organization in terms of managing and welcoming and getting the best use out of the person who's recruited. Of course, we might talk about the specific documents that might be involved there. Well, you might have some sort of job analysis leading to a job description Okay, you might also have a person specification. It might also be necessary to have some sort of process or procedure documentation, not necessarily to hire somebody, but to be able to bring somebody into the organization and to provide. So you might talk about training materials to aid induction. Now, that's not strictly part of the recruitment phase or part of what makes a candidate attractive to an employer. But I do think it's important to consider things in the round. So if you're going to go looking for an employee, it's very rare that you're going to find somebody who meets all of the criteria exactly. So therefore, there's going to be an element of compromise somewhere. Now, perhaps that compromise might mean that you take on somebody and you're going to have to provide some additional training. So not only do you need to have the job description, the person specification, and maybe a job advertisement, but you also kind of need to have some sort of infrastructure or process or training documentation or knowledge base that you can then apply to that person if they take the job. So, what makes a candidate attractive to employers, how they fit against these skills and capabilities, and what their attitude is. But also, it's a function of, well, how well are we geared to take that person on? So, when we look at our business problems, and we'll deal with the tasks in a second, we have to bear in mind that there are human elements, there are technological or physical resources, and then there are financial, which we'll be talking about next week. We've talked about the human elements in terms of the resources requirement we have there, in terms of identifying what we need and what might make somebody attractive when we go to choose somebody. The same idea really applies in terms of technology. What do we need? Where are we going to get it? And how much is it going to cost? So, those are some of the fundamental questions. What do we need? And that's really a function of what is our objective, what is our strategy, and what do we currently have available. Okay. And then, let me deal with that first of all. So, those questions, which apply to both human, technological, and financial resources, what do we need to move forward? Well, that depends on where we're going, what our objective is. It depends on how we're going to get there, what's our strategy for getting there, and it depends on what we have currently available. Can we repurpose some existing resources, human or technological or financial resources? Can we reallocate them to this new job? And assuming we can, we might do that, but it still may leave some gaps. So when we have those gaps, then we have to address the issue: where do we find the necessary resources outside the organization? Okay. And that might be a case of, understanding the labor market, understanding technology, technology options. It might mean understanding things like the financial markets. Okay, where do we find those resources? And after we've worked out where they are, is how are we going to attract, acquire, how are we going to attract employees or investment or acquire the necessary equipment, etc. Okay, and of course that comes down to, do we have the funds? What? Do we have the knowledge and capability to resource effectively? Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. And those are the questions we can apply to human, technological, and financial resources. What do we need? Where are we going to find them? What do we need? Where are we going to find them? And then how are we going to attract or get them to commit to us? So that's our fundamental challenge. Okay. Now, when we talk about operations, we really have to think about things like, well, what are we looking to do here? When we talk about resources and technology, what are we looking to achieve here? Okay. And there's a certain element of change ongoing all the time now, in terms of what we can and we can't do, in terms of what capability is available to us. So if we look at some of the, let me just get this video, some of the technology that's out there. Let me just load this.
We're in the Capel Amazon Fulfillment Center. This building is just over 1 million square feet and employs over 900 full-time hourly associates. The robot behind me is called RoboStow, and this is a 6-ton robotic arm that lifts pallets of items 24 feet onto a second platform. You have Amazon Robotics. Those particular machines weigh over 700 pounds, and they can lift up to 3,000 pounds of customer items. The Amazon Robotics are really fascinating to watch. They're moving on a field of QR codes. They have motion sensors, so there's a couple of times where it looks like, oh, are they gonna run into each other? They're not. They're very smart. They know not to run into each other. And they're just moving the items around, and it is really interesting to watch these guys work in action. That's a packing station, and that's where once an item has been picked with the Amazon Robotics, and then associates will pull those totes. They'll pack them up into back boxes, put in all the packaging, the padding needed to make sure they get to your house in one piece. So this is the SLAM line, and SLAM stands for Scan, Label, Apply, and Manifest. It does not mean that a label is being slammed onto your item. It basically is the first point that a customer label and mailing address is being added to the box. Packing customer boxes into the back of a truck is a lot like playing a game of Tetris. We don't want to pack air. Air is expensive, it's heavy. We'd much rather pack it to the brim with customer items.
Okay. So the reason I want to show you that was to show you some of the moving parts. So in that clip we saw well, you see, obviously got the robotic arm. We've got, you know, the flowing mechanisms, the moving mechanisms, the conveyor belts, if you like, or production lines, not production lines, the stacking lines. You've got the organized space in terms of venues and addresses and so on. You've got staff involved doing things like, where has she gone? So the packing of the preparation and packing of stuff that's going out the door, and of course you've got the robots, okay, moving stuff back and forth and around the stacking facility. These robots are able to lift 3,000 pounds worth of 3,000 pounds in weight, and what this facility does is it means that because everything is coded into location and everything else, the robots can do an awful lot of the moving stuff around, bringing packages to individuals for packing and so on, and feeding them into the system, so that the whole system gets through a much larger volume of activity than otherwise. So you've got human resources, technological resources, system resources, robotics. The whole thing works together. It's a comprehensive, integrated system. Okay, and it all has to work, and of course it all has to be paid for. So not only do we have the human resources, not only do we have the technology and the systems, etc., but we've got the capital tied up. So I think what they say at the start of the video, that it was 1 million square feet of space. All that equipment, those robots don't come cheap, I'm sure. All those mechanical routing equipment and everything else, the conveyor belts, the rollers, all of that costs money. So all of that has to be invested into the organization on the basis that there's going to be a certain return. And that justifies the financial equation, which we'll talk about next week. So when we talk about business resources, when we talk about modern operations, you know, we've got to bear in mind that we're talking about such an integrated system. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this particular piece. These two pictures of that. Yeah, down below here, you'll see something similar to Amazon. A highly automated picking distribution mechanism. Okay, where products are picked for dispatch. This is an operation within Zalando. Now, Zalando is an online fashion retailer, okay, European based. And what Zalando does is it has a whole, like Amazon, like Wish or one of these places. It's got a whole system set up for online commerce around fashion, and then it's got this whole distribution mechanism to fulfill all those orders. Now, this room here on top, this is in a 200-year-old building down in Dublin Docks. I've been in it myself. And what it is it's an old warehouse and it's been converted into a digital factory. So all you have here is rows upon rows of workstations where Zalando staff can work on managing and maintaining their interface, their web interface that all their orders come through. And they do their digital marketing and et cetera, and everything else through centers like this. And separately, somewhere else, there's a completely separate distribution processing system, which is a multi-story factory, basically a warehousing facility, which is highly automated, linked to orders and everything else, and it supports all of the orders and everything else that come through this system. So with modern operations, what we're talking about is some sort of digital interface enabling of processes and automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, as well as human involvement in the fulfillment side. Okay, that's what we're talking about. And if we're talking about enabling that, well, we've got to figure out, well, what are the resources that we're going to use? How are they going to fit together? How are the systems going to connect? Where are we going to get them? Who's going to pay for them? How much are we going to pay? What's the cost of capital on this? What's the payback period? Okay, as to when this investment actually returns itself in terms of enabling revenue, etc. That's what we have to deal with, all of that. So in our module learning program, these are the criteria we're starting to deal with, and we've talked a bit about the first element already, in terms of the recap on the how organizations select their employees and the documents they require. Well, we mentioned things like the jobs design, or analysis and design. We talked about job description, person specification, and possibly also a job recruitment advertisement. Okay, and separately, then when we talk about the importance of employability, describing the importance of employability and personal communication skills, well, really coming out of that very same job analysis, we should be able to identify the critical factors and capabilities required. And we should only be able to do that based on a clear understanding of the work and operations. Okay, so that should help us in terms of our ability to set up a recruitment campaign. Now we're going to talk about the importance of physical and technological resources. As part of this, you're going to undertake an assignment. So in this assignment, you're going to produce a guide for applicants on the recruitment documentation used. Well, that's a guide to the documents we've talked about. We've talked about the job description, talked about the personal specification, and the job advertisement, of which we looked at, and we'll be looking at in the other module, job recruitment advertisement. And remember, the purpose of recruitment is to generate the widest possible pool of potential employees from whom you can select. Okay, so the guide should use a specified job role as an example to describe the recruitment documentation and the main employability, personal, and communication skills required. So really, we should end up with a document, a sample actual job description, person specification, and recruitment advertisement. That's what we should end up with as part of your requirements for that first module. That first task, for that first task. For the second task, you've got to produce a leaf that describes the main physical and technological resources required. So, as I said, there's a typo there. Let me just bin that. Sorry, that's okay. That's okay. The main physical and technological resources required in the operation of a selected organization. So, well, that's what we're covering now. This, of course, is rooted in the idea of production lines. So, we talked about if you look at the other lecture, we had this idea of the 758 to 93, which was the time in minutes that it took to produce a Model T Ford in the plant in Rouge River, I think it was. So it went from 758 minutes to 93 minutes. So Henry Ford, with his production line, by studying, by involving mechanical engineers and studying the work and looking at everything that was going on, Ford was able to redesign a production line to reduce the average time taken to build a car from 758 minutes, which is about 13 hours, to 93, which is an hour and a half. So instead of one car rolling off the production line every 13 hours, he had a car coming off the production line he had them coming off much more than that, but it was taking 93 minutes to make a car from start to finish because he was able to produce a much more efficient production line. And the idea behind a production line, of course, is that the work moves along and people and nowadays robotics does a lot of the work sequentially. Okay, so people do their work on their piece of specialized work, and it goes to the next person or the next person or the next person. In other words, that it's all moving along a production line. This is not a Ford production line. I don't think it is. It's from a different organization, sometime in the 20s. And you see there's a lot of, women here at the start, the front end, working on production lines, some sort of sub-assembly, it looks like to me, which will be fed on down the production line to where other people are doing their work, and it will come off and feed into the next stage. Okay? But that's what we're really talking about. When we talk about technological and physical resources, or even systems, how does it work together best? So we see production lines in every situation. If you've been into a Subway or a McDonald's or any other fast food restaurant, you effectively see a production line in the background. Okay? You can see that there are different workstations, there's process flows. McDonald's, for example, I always remember with McDonald's, because as a student, I worked in McDonald's, that your burgers are cooked on a grill, and once the frozen burgers go onto a hot grill, and then you start assembling your burger by having the buns and the toaster, and they have a certain amount of time in the toaster, they pop up, you take them out, you start to dress the buns, turn the burgers, so they're still cooking, and you're dressing the buns, even down to the situation where we had a little sauce gun at the time, which was like a polyfilled tube, one of these adhesive tubes that fits into a thing, and you squeeze, and out comes a little bit of gel, whatever it is, at the end, which you seal windows with, for example. Well, it was the same thing, sauce gun, and we used to shoot the burgers so that there'll be a dispatch of sauce onto each burger, onto each bun. You would add lettuce, or you would add pickles, or whatever it is. Then the burgers are done, they get put onto the burger being assembled. The top bun goes on, it goes into a wrapper, and it goes into a chute off to the customer. Okay? Cheese was the other ingredient, of course. And I always remember that as part of the production process, I was told by my supervisor that you would put on cheese. It was 2 pieces of cheese on a cheeseburger, 1 slice, and then you took another slice and you turned it 45 degrees So it creates the star effect. And this was a crucial part of the process, which apparently took me several goes to get right because I kept getting told about the same thing. Um, but that was a production line in McDonald's. Same thing applies in a Subway restaurant, if you have Subway restaurants, or other sandwich stores, sandwich chains, other fast food chains, that there's a stage by stage process. And it's been mapped out because engineers have studied this, and workflow experts have looked at this. They figured out what's the quickest, most effective way to make this work: a production line. Now, there is a balance between driving scientific engagement and creativity and human resources. And there's always going to be a tension there between managing people effectively, and we're going to be talking about motivation in the HR module, and getting people to do what they need to do to enable a system. But what we're seeing more and more is that robotics and systems and artificial intelligence are taking on more and more of the repetitive, predictable type of stuff. So that the future jobs in the future are going to be much more around creative thinking in terms of how can we use, how can we do, how can we write, how can we construct. And those more mundane elements will be more and more automated. At least that seems to be where we're going. Okay. So when we talk about production lines, that's at the heart of what we talk about in terms of technological and physical resources. Of course, it's not just production lines for product output, it's production lines for services, it's production lines which enable any business process. So what we're finding is some sort of element of predictability or repeatability that enables the output of the business. Okay. Any questions at this stage? Nope. Okay, thank you. All right. So we have this sort of core business process: inputs, business operation, outputs. When we talk about core resources outside of non-human resources, we're talking about things like, we're talking about things like machinery. Hang on. We're talking about things like machinery, production lines, like I've just shown you, raw materials, sub-assemblies, drawings and designs, and tools, non-human resources. Okay, that's what we're talking about. And what we're looking to do is to use these resources to meet the needs of our customers. Now, that can be direct production or it can be support. So it doesn't have to be something that goes into a physical product. It can be something that enables our ongoing engagement and operations. So if we were producing a book, so let's take something. So, we all know what a book is. All right. That's a small little book there. There's another one there. Okay. A book, content, pages, and a cover. So what's involved in producing that? Well, if you think about it, actually, there's a number of key steps. There's manuscript development. That's the content. Okay. There's pre-press production, which is no worries, which is getting the thing ready to be actually printed. There's the manufacturing of the book itself, which in terms of the print coordination and the actual printing of the book, and then there's the marketing, sales, and distribution. Okay, so when you think about it, there's a process here, and there's technology and resources applied at each stage. Okay, so in terms of manuscript development, well, before there's a book, there has to be content, and that content is written by an author or a team of authors. And so there may be illustrations, there may be indexes, there may be dialogue, there may be proofing of the piece. So all that is part of getting a manuscript prepared. And that manuscript then goes into pre-press production. In other words, before it's actually printed, somebody will have to design a cover. Somebody will do a layout of the book in terms of interior design, maybe changing the text or the layout of the text. There may well be some sort of proofreading or editing at that stage and sending it back to the author to correct, and maybe registrations in terms of getting ISBN numbers. At that stage, then, once it's finalized and you've got a final book ready for printing, that will go to print itself. And that's where there'll be a print job in terms of, creating print plates or setting them up digitally, and loading the paper and the ink, etc., and running the printing machines to create the actual physical pages and finalizing that with some sort of binding and finishing department so that pieces are assembled correctly with the cover and are glued or bound and chopped to the right size and smoothness, etc. And once that's done, then the book is available for distribution and sale. Now, not all of these things will happen in strict sequence. So, for example, some of the marketing will be done before the book actually runs off the printer. So, a lot of sales work and marketing work will be done beforehand to gauge how many copies we're going to print, which feeds back into the print production. But that's the core idea, if you like. Manuscript development, pre-press, printing or manufacturing, and then marketing, sales, and distribution of the book. Okay? So what you can see there is that at each stage there are different elements of technology. So when we're producing a manuscript, we're going to be talking about a word processor. We're going to be talking about writing at Microsoft Word or some other application, some sort of spell checker, some sort of design tool or layout tool. You may be using a printer to print off a hard copy. So you send your manuscript in on paper. Some publishers still want that. Next stage is pre-press production. Again, not massive equipment, but software. So lots of software in terms of how we design a book effectively, design the cover, do the graphics right, etc. Then you've got the actual manufacturing, the heavy engineering. So the big printing presses that cost anywhere from, a few thousand to $1 million or two in terms of the cost of buying and installing a big, large printing press. And then you've got, again, that's all part of the system, which is controlled as well. So there'll be production control systems. And then you've got the marketing, sales, and distribution. So you've got distribution like we saw in the Amazon video, or you've got distribution, you've got the trucks and the vans, etc. You've got the packaging, you've got the marketing work around presentations and getting staff to various book fairs and so on. So you've got all those sort of elements coming together so that we can produce a book. All right. So that's a walkthrough, if you like, of all the elements involved in and where technology impacts. Now, if you think about it, if we didn't have a spell check on our Microsoft Word or whatever package you're using, that would create extra work. That means that whoever's doing the text proofreading also has to be able to mark all the spelling errors. They're probably doing, they're doing a check on this anyway. But if there was no spell check, it's likely that a lot more errors will be fixed at the text proofreading stage than with the spell check. Okay. In terms of the design, we can use things like font, etc., and font size and spacing and so on to get the layout to the best possible solution as well. So we do that with a graphic design package. So the point I'm making is there's lots of different technical resources here. We've got to figure out what do we need without saying we need everything, because we don't need everything. And how do we get it and make it work? I'll give you an example of that's fine, yeah, no problem. I'll give you an example of what I mean. If you think about a whiteboard, okay, so we could be running a college, and I could be sitting in a classroom with a whiteboard, which is a digital whiteboard, and it's got linked up to a printer, and it's all digitized and everything else, so I can draw and I can print off and so on and so forth. If I was setting up a school or college myself, I would ask myself, do we actually need that sort of equipment? because nowadays I can bypass some of the technology in a digital whiteboard with this. All I need is a ordinary whiteboard that I can write on, and I can take a photograph and email my notes to myself or to my students. I can actually use a glass panel with the same markers to draw on. So, we can bypass some of the elements. We can look at every situation and figure, well, what do we actually need? And by the way, is there a better way of doing this? So those are questions we should be asking in every case. Okay. So I want to run through this example, and then I'm going to show you, then I'm going to go back to space. Okay. If you think about it, how we leverage technological resources is really important for making our business as effective as possible. Not because it reduces cost, but also because it enables our customer. It makes the job easier for our customer. Now, I went through this in the video, but just let's run through it one more time. So if you think about going to a grocery store and buying your groceries, the red hours are something that the customer has to do. They have to visit the shop. Along the way, they may well have to go to a bank branch or an ATM to get cash out. Okay, so now we can use chip and pin, or we can pay with our cards at the till. But the alternative is maybe they want to pay in cash, or maybe the store doesn't take cards. So it may involve a trip to a bank branch or an ATM. To get cash on the way. The customer has to go around the store, selecting the groceries they want. Which, if you're going to a store and you walk around, depending on if you've got a black belt in shopping or not, you can get around in 5 minutes or half an hour or 40 minutes or an hour. But they go around with a basket or a buggy or a trolley or whatever it is, and they pick up their groceries, and then they bring those groceries to the till. And at the till, before that, staff in our business will have stocked the shelves. So they'll have unpacked materials from our warehouse, brought them out and restacked them on the shelves. And what, of course, a lot of retail businesses do is they take them out of boxes and they put them on individually in the shelves. So there's an unpacking and a stacking of shelves process. Our customer brings their basket or their trolley to the till, where we have a checkout operator who will scan every single product, generating a bill. So the groceries will be totaled by the person, our staff member at the checkout. The customer will be told what the bill is, and they will offer the cash that they've taken from the ATM. And then they will take their change and their groceries and they will go. Now, because we have some sort of systems connection, once the groceries are totaled at the till, our stock ordering will be already updated. So, our system will know that actually another loaf of bread has gone out, or 2 cans of beans have gone, or whatever has gone. So, there'll be systems in the background that'll be adding up what the stock should be and what's now available, and triggering suggestions for stock ordering with customers and so on. That's all part of the electronic data interchange, and I'm not going near that right now. Also, when we offer the money, that will be lodged at the store's bank account. If it's electronic by card, it'll go straight to automatically. Otherwise, the cash will be taken. It'll be calculated. It'll be batched. It'll be counted, and it'll be taken off securely to the bank. So there's a lot of manual processes in that exercise. Okay. If, on the other hand, we look at doing my grocery shopping online. So as a customer, I go to the store's website. I go through the website, I select the products I want. Okay. What does the business have to do? Well, the business has to maintain the website, but it doesn't have to stock shelves. Okay. Okay, if I'm running a traditional store, then I'll do that as well. But if I'm focused on this, I can just work with the warehouse. Okay. So the customer, I'm selecting the groceries. Okay. I will go to my shopping cart on the website where the grocery will be total. I will pay online, and the next thing I know is that the groceries will be delivered at the time frame I required. So my investment in terms of my time and effort and energy is significantly reduced. In addition, the business has reduced its efforts because it doesn't need to unpack and repack and restock shelves. With this process, it's automatically The stock ordering is being updated, like over here. I like the possibility up here because it's all being done electronically. There's no person at the till having to scan all the groceries because that's going to be done in all the picking, the stock picking. Uh, and when I pay online, it goes straight through to the bank account, and then my groceries are delivered. So this is a much smoother process. Yes, the products still have to be picked and assembled. Um, but like we saw with the technology with the Amazon piece, the technology is enabling this all the time. So that's going to become more and more efficient. So this saves everybody time. The only thing that's losing out on here is staff time, which is what's exactly happening. Is we see jobs that are being eroded or um, replaced by artificial intelligence and robotics and technology. Okay, so it's in that frame we've got to think about, well, what are the technological resources? What do we need? What does it make sense to have? So, like a website, uh, an e-commerce enabled website makes sense for this. It's required for this element. Otherwise, it can just be like a shop window website, much simpler website. But this enables a significant technological leap and therefore business savings. So, what are the technological resources that make sense? I guess that's what we're really talking about. I'm going to skip this for a minute because I want to go to talk about this. All right. So, let me just show you this video here.
You've probably never tried to use a pen upside down, but if you did, you'd have a tough time. Now imagine you're in outer space, where there's no gravity at all. What do you do? October 11th, 1968. The first Apollo astronauts enter Earth's orbit, and the first space pens were right there with them.
An astronaut pen. It writes upside down.
That's a Fisher space pen. You might have seen it on Seinfeld, of all places. They're not like other pens. Instead of relying on gravity, they have special pressurized cartridges that use nitrogen gas to push ink out, which means they can write at any angle, or in extreme cold, or extreme heat, where the ink in a normal pen would get too thick or too thin to write. And while most pens use water-based ink, space pens use glycol, allowing them to write underwater or even through grease. Paul Fisher first created the pressurized ink cartridge in 1966. The next year, NASA purchased 400 of them for $6 a pop. More than 60 years later, Fisher space pens are used on the International Space Station. Your other pens might run out of ink pretty quickly, but this one should last you about 100 years. And even if you haven't planned your next trip to the moon, a space pen could still come in handy.
A lot of times I write in bed, and I have to turn and lean on my elbow to make the pen work.
Take the pen.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Go ahead. I couldn't. Come on.
Okay. So, that's a bit facile at the end, but you get this. You get the core message, right? So, sending astronauts to the moon or into space, it's a pretty big initiative, and it involves lots of human resources, lots of technological and physical resources, and of course, financial resources. The reason I wanted to show you this is that when you think about it, this is just one simple piece. How can astronauts write in space? Well, now, there is an apocryphal story about how, NASA, the space pen here was developed and it cost $1 million to develop this idea of the space pen, which is a real thing, the Fisher space pen. This was NASA's solution, whereas the Russians, who were in the space race at the time, they just brought a pencil. But of course, that sounds like a really good story. It's not actually true, though. Yes, at first astronauts did use pencils. The reality is the space pen makes sense. It's not the only solution, by the way. The problem is when you get into this, you've got to look and see, well, what's the right technological solution? And pencils have a problem, as do some other mechanisms. The issue is not writing. Yes, pencils will write upside down, and ballpoint pens won't. The issue is not writing, it's the risk associated. So, one of the challenges with space flight is the risk of fire. Okay. So, with regards to everything, NASA was trying to, and of course, in the Soviet space race, were trying to reduce the risk of fire at all cases. So the problem with a pencil is not that it writes or doesn't write upside down. It does. It's that it's graphite. It flakes off. So when you're writing with a pencil, tiny microscopic particles of graphite do flake off. Now, for you or I, that's not a problem. It falls on the desk or on the floor or whatever. But in space, of course, there's no gravity, so these can float around. And you're in a space capsule, which is a complex piece of machinery. So the last thing you want is tiny little microscopic pieces of, or even non-microscopic pieces of graphite, which is carbon, getting into spaces where it shouldn't be. So therefore, pencils are not the ideal solution either. So I'm not saying that you have to buy a space pen by any means. I'm just using this to illustrate the fact that when you look at the process, when you look at what you're trying to achieve and you look at the resources requirements and the technology requirements, you've got to factor in all the elements. Now, of course, NASA has the money to do this effectively and to put lots of research in and to get this done. It turns out that they bought special pens at a cost of roughly $120 each, because of course they're naturally cautious, and NASA has experience because we've had the Challenger disaster, we've had the Columbia disaster, we've had the Apollo 1 disaster. So NASA has lost equipment and astronauts, so they do take this stuff seriously. But that's the point: is figuring out what's the right technology, what do we need to do to solve the problem, where can we get it, where can we build it, how can we build it, how can we design it. That's what we're trying to deal with. And it might be something as simple as, well, I can't use a plastic spatula on a hot grill because it melts, but then I can't use a metal utensil on a non-stick frying pan. So there's a balance in all things. It's trying to figure out what's the right tool, what's the right equipment for the job at hand. All right. What does it take to get it there? So, for example, if we look at other production lines, here you've got beer bottles, right, going through a factory. So obviously the bottles have to be sterilized, they have to be filled, they have to be sealed and capped, and they need labels. So how does that all work out? We don't have an individual doing all of that by themselves. We've got to have, well, we could do, but it's cost benefit. So if we're going to have a mass production line, so we're not a craft beer maker, then we're going to need equipment that does all that. So the equipment has to be developed to solve that particular problem. So how do we sterilize bottles? So more likely it's steamed. How do we fill them up? Well, there has to be equipment to recognize when a bottle is in the right place. So the liquid goes in, it's pressurized, it's gas added, how is it sealed, etc., etc., etc. So all of these pieces are part of the problem as to how we develop solutions to these technological resource issues. So what you need to do for your assignment is think about your business environment or a business environment. What are the technological or physical resources required? And where can you get them? Okay. What are the resources required and where can you get them? So if I'm running an educational business, well, what are the technological or physical resources required? Well, I probably need things like, I need display equipment. And you know what? If I'm doing this online, I need access to an online classroom capability, just like this one, which is WizEQ. Okay. Physical or technical resources. Well, maybe I might need textbooks, right? Or learning assessments, right? Or aids. Okay. What are the physical? No, I need teachers as well, but that's a separate thing. That's a human resource side. I may also need, for example, module descriptors, so that actually courses run according to a set plan, etc. And where can I get them? That's the next question. Maybe I need special educational suppliers. Okay, suppliers. Maybe I need to look at publishing companies, and in particular educational publishers. Okay, maybe I need to look at qualification regulators for some of the module descriptors, etc. Okay, so what are the resources that we need for the business, and where do we get them? If you think back to a barber shop, a flower shop, what are the resources or the technical or physical resources required? If I'm running a hospital and I'm running an operating theater, I need sterilized instruments. I need X-ray machines. I need an MRI machine. I need surgical operating theaters, which are clean and cleanable. Okay, I need special gurneys and beds. What I need drip holders. I need special blood and fluid pumps. So every situation has different requirements. Your task is to address that within the framework of the task you've been set or the business that you're looking at. All right, any questions? No? Okay. All righty then. Okay, well look, we will finish there. I did that. I'll use the direct mail example a bit later on in the course, because it just illustrates some of the work that we're doing and where it makes sense. But I will leave it there. All right. Thank you very much. Pavana, you want to ask me a question? I'll hang on for you. And just give me a minute or two, and we'll take it from there. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, so you have some questions? Okay, shoot. Do you want to do it verbally or? Let's see, that's what you want. Okay, I've enabled your account on your video.
Can you see me?
Hang on 1 second.
Can you hear me?
I
Hello.
hear you. Just give me 1 second. I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, shoot.
Is the video on or the only audio?
Just the audio, I think. I don't think the video is on.
Okay, okay. So I had questions. It's that I did the assignment. How was my assignment?
I can't give you feedback yet because I need to finish all of them, but I should have that by Friday. So look, I wouldn't worry. I mean, I said I can't give you formal feedback yet, but
Okay.
I've started going through them. But I
Okay.
should have feedback for you by Monday at the latest.
Okay. Another thing is this, like the next assignment is due date November 8th, right?
Yes, I think so. Give me 1 second.
Yes, it's 8, 11, and
Yep.
2019.
Yep. That sounds
So,
right.
yeah, for the next assignments, I again need to submit 2 assignments. Each
Yep.
assignment got 4 tasks, right?
No, one of them has 2, I think. Just give me 1 second. The business resources one has 4 tasks. Yep. And the human resources one has got
Human resources
has
have
2
4
tasks.
tasks too.
Has 2 tasks.
Okay, so for the business resources, how many companies I will talk about? 1 company or 2 company?
You can. It depends. So I mean, I think I'm just looking at the assignment brief for the business resources. So you know what I would do is, for me, and you can use the same companies as you've used before. Okay,
Okay.
if that suits. I try and stick with 1 or 2. So the first task is produce a guide for applicants on recruitment documentation within a selected organization. So identify an organization that you're familiar with and choose, work up their stuff for that. The second one, again, a selected organization. You can stay with the same organization. The third one, you selected business, and the fourth one is, so you can use 1 company for the 4 tasks. You don't have to compare them.
I can use 1 company and I can use the same company I use for my other assignments, right?
Yes, you can do. Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Now
And for
it doesn't mean it. So if I was doing it right, that's what I would try and do. But it doesn't mean that I don't use a different company to illustrate a point. I can always include a second one, but I would try and stick with the 1 organization where it makes sense, where you've got the content. If you don't have it, then use a different organization. But it makes sense to me to try and use the 1 organization because it deepens your overall understanding and it makes it easier to pull stuff together. Do you know what I mean?
And for the second assignment, human resource management, for the 2 tasks, should I how many company I need to use? 1 company.
Well, this one is sort of set as a it's like a fictitious. The scenario 1, the organization that you work for has recently won some large contracts and is expanding rapidly. Blah blah blah. So you're asked to report on the internal external factors to consider when planning human resources. So it's like it's set up for a fictitious organization. So it's as if you're in the situation. Now, what I would do in that paper is, I would think about an organization that I knew that sort of sounded like that, and you can always refer to it in that. But you're writing about this particular fictitious organization initially. But there's nothing to say you can't bring in other organizations to augment your solution.
Okay.
Is that okay?
So for the human resource also, I can use the same or same company before I used or the new one.
Yes, you can. Yeah, but remember that let's say you choose the SEMA, wasn't it? The plantation one, right? Let's say
Simon Derby.
Yeah. Let's say you choose that organization and you're using that throughout, just for argument's sake. When you're doing the HR one, you have to write it for this other this fictitious organization, but you can refer to that Simon in your answer.
Like how their HR management works, right? Like that.
In other words, as shown or as this organization has done. So does that make sense? Because HR, like it's a common enough process, but you have to relate it into the individual situation. So you can use it as an example, certainly.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's all was my questions.
Okay. All right, Pradoni.
Thank you so much.
See you on Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.